Hello, everybody. Welcome on back to Fantasy Football Futures. Today is Thursday, September 23rd, and we are filming right before the exciting game between the Carolina Panthers, Houston Texans. I'm Tyler. This is Tim.
What's up?
In today's episode, we're going to go over some of our must-starts for Sunday, some fades, and some sleepers for this Sunday, and as well as get into some of our prop bets that we have for Sunday. And then that'll be out Saturday, like always. And then we'll film our little pick'em show where we just go over each game, give some picks and everything, and then give you our lock, favorite, underdog. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. Some of the news that has recently happened from Tuesday to Thursdays, looking like Carson Wentz has 2 ankle sprains.
Yeah, one's high, one's low.
More than likely not playing this Sunday.
Yep, and then I kind of expected that when they said both ankles. So it looks like they're going between Easton and who's the other one?
Easton and Brett Hundley, which to me, I feel like I would trust Jacob Easton a little more. He played a lot. I felt like he looked better in the preseason. I don't know. I mean, I'll be interested to see. I'm kind of curious to see how this is going to affect either. Do you think it benefits guys like Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, or do you think it hurts them? And then the same with Pittman. How do you think that's going with Pittman?
Yeah, but you also have to look at who they're playing. They're playing the Titans defense, so
who's really weak. Yeah.
If you see Easton or one of them maybe has a pretty good game, I would not overreact to that because of the defense they're playing. Or you could look at the other way is if you're playing like daily fantasy or you're needing I wouldn't say fantasy, but daily fantasy, you're looking for a low price. Titans defense, it's going to be probably the lowest of the low, facing a very bad quarterback. Could get some value out of that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I can't really trust Titans defense.
No, you can't.
They gave up a lot. They're facing some a good running team with a very solid offensive line. So be careful with that. But yeah, so Wentz out. Derek Carr, who rolled his ankle as well late in the game on Sunday, he is projected to play as of right now. Correct?
Yes.
So he's still good. Gibson sat out of practice the other day with his shoulder injury, but Ron Rivera came out today and said that he will be fine. Yeah. But that's something to keep an eye on because I think it was even bothering him some last week, which is why you saw a lot more of J.D. McKissick. So that's a big news for a big name guy. You got any other?
I just saw Odell will be playing on Sunday.
Oh yes, Odell. He will be activated first time off his knee surgery. So that's something to keep an eye out for. How that, especially with Jarvis Landry not playing this week, being placed on IR. And then the other update we had was Antonio Brown had gotten placed on the COVID reserve list. So he won't be playing.
He is vaccinated though, so if he gets, I think it's two
negatives
in 24 hours, I think he'll be good to go. But it's up in the air right now. So
that's something to keep an eye out for. And then just 10 minutes ago, the Bengals website calls T. Higgins on pace to sit this week. So he's going to be another injury factor, and that can really boost Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase this week, as well as Joe Mixon running the football. So those are all I have. Do you have any extra players that kind of are going through the... Dalvin Cook's one to watch.
I think Josh Jacobs.
Ankle.
Did you say Josh Jacobs?
No, not yet.
He practiced today, but it was a non-contact jersey he had on, so he's questionable. And then Lamar missed practice due to a non-COVID illness, but looks like he'll be fine.
Yep. So that is that's pretty much it for injuries. Dalvin Cook, like we said, sprained ankle, didn't practice the other day, but I'd expect him to play. I feel like if he doesn't play, go pick up Madison. I think that's going to only benefit Jefferson, Thielen, and Kirk Cousins. But yeah, he's just one to keep an eye out for because he did get dinged up late in that second half. And then Deonte Johnson, like we talked about, still unsure if he's playing or not this week. Did he practice today?
I don't think he did. I didn't see anything about that.
That's 2 days where he's been sitting out. So just keep an eye out for that because that will really benefit. And with Big Ben also possibly being out too. So got to keep an eye out for all those Steelers out. And that is all the news that we have with injuries and updates over the last 2 days. So let's go ahead and jump right in to some of our Sundays must-starts. First one for me being Devonte Smith with the Eagles against the Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football. This, I feel like, is pretty obvious. Dallas defense, not great. I look back. They give receivers against them have had 10 or more points in each matchup, like big-time receivers. So, like, you look at all Bucks besides Antonio Brown or Mike Evans, 10 or plus. You look last week against the Chargers. They all had a good outing. Mike Williams had a great outing. So I expect Devonte Smith to have a very big game this week, especially being Jalen Hurts' I think, favorite target and their best playmaker on the field. So look out for Devonte Smith against a very weak Dallas defense to have a very big game. And them to kind of reconnect what they did week one. I know last week, that was just a weird week last week. So really Devonte Smith to me is a must start. He's too good. I know he's a rookie, but I think he'll get very little weeks where he gets 2 or 3 points again. So,
yeah, last week they played a very good 49ers team. After that first drive, they looked very confused. I expect them to bounce back. I'm pretty high on the Eagles. I know the first week was against the Falcons, but they're going against Dallas on prime time. Dallas D, like you said, is not that good.
No.
So you should see more of longer drives, just better fantasy outcomes for a lot of players, Jalen Hurts included. Yes. But I think Devonte Smith will be that best wide receiver. I know some people are talking about is it Rager?
Jalen Reagor.
They're talking about him a little bit, but I think Devonte Smith he's that number one wide receiver on that team.
Yeah, so this week in PPR leagues, they average 20.5. They've given up several touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 839 yards. So yeah, I expect the Dallas Cowboys to not have a very good week. In the last 2 games, they've given over 400 yards twice now. So I'm looking at that to continue with the Eagles. So for me, he's a no-brainer, must start. Same, and pretty much anybody on the Eagles this week is pretty much a good must start. So he's my one. Who do you have at one?
So my number one is actually going to be Colton Sutton. He actually, I was going to mention him last week, but I decided not to because he is coming off that big injury, and it was just the first game without Jerry Jeudy, so I wanted to see how he did, and he looked great. Had let's see, what was his?
He had I
think he had 160 yards. Yeah, 9 receptions, 159 yards receiving. Unfortunately, he did not get that touchdown. I expect him to get that touchdown this week. They're playing against a bad Jets backfield.
They're not playing it. Are they playing it? Yeah, they are playing
Yeah, they are playing the Jets.
I was on week 4.
Week 4 they play Baltimore. So that's a little different. Yeah. But Jerry Jeudy out again. I expect Teddy Bridgewater just to do the same game plan like they did last week against the Jaguars and just go to Sutton. I know, like I say, he didn't get that touchdown, but I do believe he gets that touchdown this week. He's only starting in 64% of leagues on Sleeper. I think that should be higher. He'll be a great flex position, and if you have 2 flexes, that's an automatic start for me.
That's what. So the only counter argument here is I feel like the Jets' defense is a lot better than what people think they might be, especially with Robert Saleh being the head out there. He's such a fantastic defensive coordinator, and he makes, like, you look at the game last week when we were talking about the Jets versus the Patriots. Yeah, they threw 4 interceptions, but that game was still a 16-point game for a long time. So I think they'll come out. It'll be a lot closer. They're not like the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. I do think he'll have a very solid game because I feel like him and Teddy have a good connection, and then Noah Fant as well. They're like all in a good connection right now. And Teddy Bridgewater, I think, is a very good quarterback. So I expect him to be able. I don't think they'll be able to run the ball that well. So to me, like you're saying, I think the passing game will have to pick up for him. So I expect him to score at least a touchdown. I think that's where you get a lot of your fancy points out of him this week. So
yeah, it was a little bit disappointing. Tim Patrick didn't do a whole lot and anything like that. They have kind of just the run game going, especially at the end there. Yeah, the Jets defense has looked a little bit better, but The Patriots' offense, I don't think is as good right now as it will be at the end of the
Oh,
season.
yeah, I
still
agree.
think they're trying to figure that out. And with that, even with the 4 touchdowns, or the not touchdowns, interceptions, that game was close. If they do that against the Broncos offense is better, and they will put up more points than that. So, and then also on top of that, Broncos defense is good, so I can see them getting a few turnovers as well. But just the target share, the workload Sutton gets with Judy gone that's what makes him a
Much
must-start.
different, yeah.
Must-start for me.
And that's what, especially with Jerry Judy being out, it takes away a lot for him, limits his options. So I had Devonte at 1, you had Cortland Sutton. My next one is going to be Sterling Shepard here with the Giants against the Atlanta Falcons. And this one I think is it's another obvious pick because Atlanta's passing defense is not good. And Sterling Shepard has become one of Daniel Jones's favorite target. He has 19 targets over 2 games with them. And we saw him have 113 yards first week and then 94 the second week. The only thing that was really the difference maker in points for him between the weeks is the first week he got in for a touchdown, the second week he did not. I expect those targets to continue to come to him. And I think he's like, a lot of attention might be on Kenny Galladay right now because they went and spent the money on him and everything. But Galladay was dinged up during the offseason, so I think every opportunity for Daniel Jones and Shepard to work together and get this chemistry was just there. And so they just went, and it's just building off of that offseason. So I love Sterling Shepard this week against a very bad Atlanta pass defense. And I just think to look for him to still average 9-10 targets again this week. So Sterling Shepard's number 2 for me.
Yep, so he's on my must-starts as well. It looks like Kenny Galladay's been banged up. He hasn't really been practicing, and so is Ingram. So if those two can make it, who else is going to be catching the ball?
And that's what with like Barkley not 100% yet too.
Yeah,
so.
and that's also the thing because they're playing against a really bad Falcons defense that have the Eagles lit them up. Buccaneers lit them up. I know the Bucks had the 2 pick sixes, but they still had 5 touchdowns from Tom Brady. So I believe that's why he's also one of my must starts is because even if you get Ingram and Galladay playing, I'm not even worried that much because even with them on the field, Shepard's been getting a ton of looks and a ton of targets.
I still think no matter what happens, he's going to get those targets and he'll be looked at by Daniel Jones. So I think he's going to be involved in the offense every week pretty heavily. So just the week against Atlanta is a very big must start for me. If he's sitting on your bench, you got to throw him in there just because they're playing Atlanta. So we both have him at 2 then. Number 3 would be, for me, is Marvin Jones against Arizona. And to me, Marvin Jones he's on a very bad Jaguars team, but they have to throw the ball to stay in the game. And over the last 2 weeks, Marvin Jones has had 20 targets with 11 catches, so he's still producing well. But what's really helped him is he's been able to find the end zone twice. And I think against Arizona's pass defense isn't great. We saw that with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota last week. They do give up points through the air. So I think going after the Jaguars' best pass catcher with Laviska Shenault being kind of dinged up this past week, I think you got to look to him to continue getting touchdowns and looks in the red zone, as well as being Trevor Lawrence's best option to throw the football team on that team. So I like Marvin Jones against a very mediocre pass defense for the Cardinals.
Yeah, so I like that play too. I try to go for the waiver wire pickup. I like what he's been doing. The only problem with that is I've been down this road before with Marvin Jones. He's been on some bad Lions teams, got thrown the ball a lot, and then all of a sudden, I wouldn't even blame it on him. There's been a few times where there's injuries, and then the quarterback just stops going to him. I think of like when he had Matt Stafford. I think it's different this time because you have a young quarterback that is trying to just get some confidence, something going. So any success he has, and that's been looking like it's been a lot of Marvin Jones, he's going to keep doing that.
And you're relying heavily on a veteran. So
So I do like the must start. I do question it just because I've been down this road with Marvin Jones. You pick him up, he looks great, and all of a sudden he just disappears. But at the same time, Cardinals offense scores a lot of points. Jaguars are going to have to try to come back in this game, and so they're not going to be running the ball a lot. And so I do like that pick with Marvin Jones.
Last year with Marvin Jones, he finished the year with 18th in PPR leagues, and then that's because of his heavy contribution at the end of the year when Galladay was just out. He had 9 touchdowns the last 2 years. He's had 9 touchdowns, and 3 times out in his career he's had 9 touchdowns. So, to me, that's a very interesting look at him, and I think that might be a big reason to rely on him just for this year with Trevor Lawrence. Yep. So, something to look forward to. Who you got at number 3? So
I have actually on the other team, I'm actually going with Chase Edmonds, running back with the Cardinals. Not just because I just got him in a trade, but when I was doing some stats and looking at a few things. So he's been targeted 9 times in the backfield. He's caught all 9 passes. When he's running the ball, he's getting over 5 yards per carry. Jacksonville's defense, they're tied for 26th in points given up to fantasy running backs. They've already given up 3 touchdowns to them, and they've only played the Broncos and the Texans, who you wouldn't say would have top tier running backs.
No.
And would have those great catching running backs out of the backfield. The Cardinals' offense is dynamic and scores a lot of points. Yes. And so I think Chase Edmonds being thrown into that and just giving everyone the ball. You'll have Hopkins and Rondale Moore we talked about earlier this week being a big pickup. I think Chase Edmonds just thrown into that loop just because how bad that Jaguars defense is against the run. And I can see him sneaking in a touchdown or 2. And that's why he's one of my must-starts this week.
That's what he'll definitely be. I mean, yeah, you've had yards per carry first week. He had 10.7 or 5.25, average both. And then with receiving, he was doing the same thing. So, I mean, he's definitely one to look at, especially in that Cardinals offense. The only thing that worries me is just how much they throw the ball to
him. Mm-hmm.
Hopkins, Rondell, and then Christian Kirk, AJ Green. They just might have too many weapons on the outside to consider what Edmonds can do. But like you said, Jacksonville have shown they're not very good against the run, and
if
the receiving backs.
If the Cardinals get up late, maybe Chase Edmonds gets a few more carries than he's doing.
And the only thing that worries me with Chase Edmonds is they do have James Conner, so those goal line touches might go to him. So I mean, against a bad Jaguars team, you got to take the chance on a guy like Edmonds this week. So. That's going to round out both of our top 3s for must starts this week. I had Devonte Smith against Dallas, Sterling Shepard versus Atlanta, and then Marvin Jones against Arizona Cardinals.
And I had Sterling Shepard with the Giants, and then I had Chase Edmonds with the Cardinals, and then who was my first one? My mind just went blank.
We both had Sterling Shepard, Marvin Jones. Or you had Sterling Shepard, Chase Edmonds, and then. Yeah, I don't remember. Shoot, what was that guy?
I don't remember either.
Will come back to us. I don't even remember. It was. It was someone I wasn't too sure about because it was a counter argument with it. I don't remember. So we'll come back.
Cortland Sutton.
There it is. So
my mind is one point.
Your 3 was Cortland Sutton, Sterling Shepard, Chase Edmonds. Mine was Devonte Smith, Sterling Shepard, Marvin Jones. That's a very good podcasting by us right there.
Going,
so those were our must starts. Now let's go ahead and move into some of our fades for this weekend. And mine starts with a number 1 running back for the Washington football team, Antonio Gibson, against a very good, I think they're the 3rd ranked right now rushing defense in the league. Mm-hmm. And that's Buffalo Bills. I just feel like Antonio Gibson with the shoulder injury, kind of what we saw last week, he's just struggling to get going right now. And I worry about them having to throw the ball to keep up with the Bills, that the Bills finally getting a nice rhythm. So, and J.D. Mckissick taking some of that role because he looked really good last week. So, for me this week, he's a fade for me against a really solid Buffalo run defense. And because he's dinged up with a shoulder injury, and he has yet to get 10 points in fantasy, right?
Yes.
So he's just, I don't know, he's not looking great. He's a little dinged up, and his 3 matchups have just been pretty tough to start the year. So I'm going to fade him this week, and just because of the matchup alone and the fact that he's dinged up and he's playing a very good defense. So
yep. So he's actually on one of my bust sits this week, just because of kind of what you said. He hasn't gotten 10 points, And then even last Thursday, Mckissick, I don't believe this will keep happening. Mckissick had a lot of touches, was on the field a lot more than you want him to be. I don't expect that to be a reoccurring thing.
I don't think every week,
it's just that offense looks struggling, and then they're going to Buffalo against a very good Buffalo defense. Buffalo's, I think, favored by 8 points. So they're expecting this to be kind of not a close game.
Yeah,
and when that happens,
with Heineke back there too,
and when
it's
you have
just
to throw the ball a lot, I think that's when McKissick is on the field a lot more. And so I agree with that. That's why he's on my list as well. Just fading Gibson this week. Look at matchups later down the road, and hopefully we can get him in there in one of those must starts because I think he's a great player.
I think he'll bounce back for sure late in the year, especially when they get to playing those conference games because their conference isn't the best. But he just had some really tough matchups to start the year, and I just think this week it's not getting any better for him, especially like we've already talked about. So we both had Gibson as our ones here. My number 2 is actually going to be a tight end. And that's Jared Cook for the Chargers. And because of Kansas City's defense and Sorensen for the Kansas City Chiefs, I think he's one of the better safeties to face tight ends. He's not really talked about a lot, but he's just all over the field. I know last week, Andrews, I think he had 4 catches or 5 catches against the Chiefs, but you just game plan differently against Lamar. So I think it was more, we'll take our chances with Andrews catching the football than Lamar running the football. So I just don't think Jared Cook will have a very good week against a strong defensive team against tight ends like the Chiefs are. So and Sorensen. So I'm gonna fade Jared Cook this week. I think he'll have some very favorable matchups later in the year. Like I thought last week he had a very good favorable matchup. He just wasn't catching as many balls as he had targets. So I'm going to fade him this week solely because of how good their defense is against tight ends and how good Sorensen can be guarding tight ends. So I'm fading Jared Cook for number 2.
Yep, so I like that fade just because I love Eckler so much this week because the Chiefs are almost last in all run defensive categories. So I believe if the Chargers game plan, what it should be is to get him, the Eckler, the balls much as possible and just let him do what he does. Mike Williams has been getting a lot of targets.
Yes.
Keenan Allen, then you have Keenan Allen doing what he always does.
Guyton,
So I think this is a good week for Jared Cook not to have that great of a start. And so I do like that sit. I think there might be better tight ends out there like Higbee or a couple other tight ends that might be you want to start a tight end just for this week. Because I do love, over the season overall, I do love Jared Cook.
Yeah, that's what I like Jared Cook with the Chargers. Like we said this week against the matchup, I'm just going to fade him this week. So that was my number 2. Who do you have at number 2
Number 2, I'm actually going with Jalen Waddle. Looks like Tua's going to be out for a week. And not for a week, but for a while.
For a little bit, yeah.
And then so Brissett's coming in, and when Brissett was in there, that offense looked terrible. Waddle even looked bad. He was dropping balls left and right. So I'm sitting Waddle, and I'm actually sitting all of Dolphins wide receivers right now just to see what's going on, what's going to happen with this offense. They're playing a Raiders defense that actually has shut down offenses that you would think would actually be pretty good with the Raiders and the Steelers. So I'm just staying away from the Dolphins wide receivers and especially Waddle.
So to me, this is a tough pick. Because I feel like if you're going to start any receiver from the Dolphins, it should be Waddle. Just because of the ability he has to take a screen route 70 yards to the house. So, and they're going to have to throw the ball. So to me, it just, I worry about him and what they're going to do with Jacoby Brissett. But I feel like you kind of give Brissett, he's not a terrible quarterback to have. So I think they'll be able to move the ball a little bit more. They did play the Bills last week, and it's just, I don't know, that game, they just did not look right from the beginning. So I expect them to be a little better, and I think if somebody does have a big week, I would think it's actually Waddle because of how explosive he is, and they're going to want to get the ball in his hands. But it's just like, but I can also see how it's, you kind of want to stay away from him because what we saw last week was not good. Yep. And if you're kind of picking between Waddle and someone else like a Pittman, you got to like backup quarterback wise, I feel like you want to take the high end on Pittman solely because of who they're playing this week.
Yep, and then also Will Fuller's back this week too, so that could take away some targets. I was about to say, Brissett did go to Waddle a lot, but it also could have been that offense who just didn't know what to do because the Tua injury just kind of took them by surprise. So I get that, but I'm just for some reason I'm just staying away from them this week. The Raiders defense, the whole team looks a little bit different. They look just like a better team than people expect. Mm-hmm. So I'm just fading them. I think they're better flex plays than the Waddle
Okay.
So I do get what you're saying.
Yeah, makes sense. So
he is a stud, and kind of a lot of my sits are just for this week. I do love Waddle for the rest of the year, and with that being on your team.
Yeah. So Waddle was your number 2, and then my last one for this weekend was a must start for me last weekend, but this week he's going to be kind of my fade, which is really unfortunate because I got him on my team. That's Naji Harris against Cincinnati's defense. Mm-hmm. Cincinnati has played Minnesota and Chicago, and they've done fairly decent against both Montgomery and Cook, which to me was a shock because I thought last year they were not very good run first defense. Mm-hmm. But they've come out, they've got some big bodies up the middle, and they're able to slow the run down. Dalvin Cook did not look great that first week. And then last week, Montgomery only had 10 points. I know they did have 2 where they did have 2 pick sixes, but Cincinnati was able to hold Cook to 61 yards rushing last week, which to me I think
Montgomery.
Or 2 weeks ago. And then last week they held Montgomery to...
I think he's only had like 60 yards.
I think it was 60 as well. So, to me, I feel like their run defense is very good. And it's going to be tough to start Naji, especially with Big Ben. Yeah, he had 61 yards as well. With Big Ben being dinged up as well as Deonte Johnson being hurt. If he doesn't play, I feel like this hurts the Steelers more because then you take away their best offensive weapon. And then you got to put it in the hands of Claypool and Juju and see what they can do. And if Big Ben's hurt, I feel like it's going to be a really big struggle for the Steelers offense, who has not looked consistent or very good at all. And I feel like it's a very big downfall. Or, I don't know, just not looking good. So Naji Harris for me is a big fade. But, you might play him for solely hoping he gets you a touchdown or two. So
would you change your mind if you knew Deonte Johnson wasn't playing, or...
No, I feel like this week they're gonna know if Johnson's not playing, and then Big Ben, if he's not playing, it makes them more one-dimensional.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's gonna be tough when the Bengals can pack the box and say beat me over top, and we're gonna shut down Naji. And Naji last week, I think he only had 40 yards rushing still against a not very good Raiders defense.
All was that 25-yard catch for
a touchdown, which really boosted his numbers. So, and I don't know, he looked slow last week, but. It's just game's faster, so hopefully he continues to grow each week and those numbers go up. But he's a big sit for me this week.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. The Bengals defense, that front four, that defensive line looks pretty good. They shut down some pretty good running backs. Montgomery actually was the highlight against the Rams. He looked pretty good, and that Rams defense is good, and then he just gets shut down by the Bengals.
Yeah.
So I can see that happening. I agree. I know. We both talked about Naji Harris, how much he's on the field. I think he's on the field almost 100% of the time.
Yeah, last week he came out a couple times, but
when you get that, that's when you get those last minute or those end of fourth quarter catches for touchdowns and saves his weeks because he's on the field so much.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening this week because that Bengals defense is good.
Yeah. So, and it's just I feel like it's gonna be tough. He might have a decent game receiving, but. I just don't know if that's going to be enough this week for him. So that rounds out my 3. Who's your last one?
So my last one is someone actually I don't like this week and probably not for the rest of the year until he proves me otherwise. I'm actually going James Robinson with the Jaguars. They're playing. I know we talk about Marvin Jones being a must-start for you. I believe the Cardinals are going to put up a lot of points. And so the Jaguars are going to have to throw the ball a lot. And it looks like they are a pass-first team anyways. So I am sitting James Robinson. He's the number 42 running back in PPR and Sleeper right now. And just doesn't look good at all. Has not scored 10 points. Yeah. So it kind of put it the same way as Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson's a lot better running back than James Robinson. But for right now, my sit is going to be James Robinson.
And that's what, to me, I agree with this because of how bad they've looked in running the football. But it's also like Arizona's defense gave up 120 plus yards rushing to Dalvin Cook last week. But I know they were able to hold Derrick Henry in check, so it's a tough play here. James Robinson, I feel like the Jaguars are going to have to get the ball moving on the ground if they want any type of success over the course of this season. And he just hasn't been able to get it done yet, and I just don't know if they will or not because, like you said, it's the offense line isn't great. And when they know it's a rookie quarterback and they'd rather have him make throws and errors instead of a guy like James Robinson's, they're going to pack the box and shove it in their face and make him throw and beat them. So, to me, it's very tough. James Robinson, I feel like you can try to sit on him again this week and hope he can kind of get back to his form last year because there were some teams he was running over and putting up some points against that nobody expected. So it's really just how much can you afford to put him on your bench, or are you? It's like you got to hurry up and ride him out, hope he has a good big week, and then maybe you can sell high on him. So I definitely agree with that. He's one that you should fade.
Very weird how little they use him after the big season he had last year.
And that's just I think the mix with Urban Meyer and their new OC. It's just it's not there. So my top fades were Gibson, Cook, and Naji Harris this week.
Mine was Gibson, Waddle, and James Robinson.
James Robinson, perfect. So those were our Sunday fades for this week. And then now let's move to our top 3 sleeper picks for week 3. And I'll just go ahead and start it off here with Michael Pittman against the Titans defense. And I know we're just talking about how Carson Wentz is out and they're going to rotate quarterbacks and everything, but I feel like he showed last week why we were so high on him to start the year because of what he could do. He had 8 catches for 123 yards, didn't find the end zone, but he had 12 targets. So to me, I feel like we saw why they're so high on Michael Pittman and why we were so high on Michael Pittman this year. And I just think we're going to continue to see him get that type of production even with these backup quarterbacks in. He's a guy they can rely on, and they can move Michael Pittman around all over the field. So I think against a Titans matchup this week, you're going to see some big points from Michael Pittman as well. So I think they're going to have to run the ball a lot and they do a lot of passing, play action pass to get guys like Michael Pittman the ball. But I think it'll be done. I think you can expect a pretty solid week out of Michael Pittman this year, and hopefully this week, and hopefully he can squeeze into the end zone for you. So I like him, especially with what Lockett did last week to the Titans. So I'm going to stick with Michael Pittman to continue growing and have another big game this week.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's actually one of my sleeper picks too. I know with Wentz probably going to be being out, you have those young quarterbacks in there that are just trying to get a rhythm, do anything, and I think Michael Pittman's going to be a reliable blanket for them, kind of throwing the ball a lot to him. And then so I think between that and then the matchup they have, Titans have given up 90 points to wide receivers already in fantasy. So if it's in the other defense, you might not be saying start Michael Pittman, but just the circumstance of how bad that defense is and just having young quarterbacks that need to get a rhythm and need to find that number one wide receiver, I think that's a great must start for Michael Pittman in a flex position.
And that's what, he's one to definitely look forward to. I think the Colts will just, I'm interested to see how it's going to look with this two quarterback system, but I just feel like he is a clear-cut number one for them, so he's a guy, if you have him, I think you got to play him, especially in flex at least, just to hope that they get him the ball because he is their best option on the outside. So that is both our ones. For number 2, it's going to be a little shocker here. I have Kirk Cousins with the Minnesota Vikings against the Seattle defense, and that's because, like we were talking about, it was Titans. Seattle, we saw last week, gave up 120-plus yards receiving to Julio Jones. And I feel like if Dalvin Cook is dinged up, they might not rely on the run as much this week. And Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback right now. He's number 9. And he has 5 touchdowns through the air, no interceptions, and he has 350 yards that first game against the Bengals. And then last week he had 244 yards. So, to me, this is one that if you're struggling with quarterback play, go pick a guy like him up right now because he is playing well. And he's got solid weapons with KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, and Justin Jefferson on the outside with him. And then Conklin's not looking bad at all either. So
Nope.
I like the Vikings here, and I like Kirk Cousins this week against a weak pass defense in Seattle. And if Dalvin Cook's hurt, I expect Kirk Cousins to pick up a lot of it on the passing game.
Yeah, I can agree. I don't know. The first week was a little bit down for him, but last week he put up a monster week against.
No, he had a monster week that first week. They had 2 monster weeks. So like the first week he was 36 out of 49 completions to 2 attempts, and that was 22 points with 351 yards and 2 touchdowns. Where last week, I mean, he did put up more points last week, but he had 20. He had that one really long touchdown pass, which was why I think bumped it up. So, to me, I think like he's fully capable of continuing to be a consistent quarterback.
I know we've mentioned here before just how the Vikings have gone to those 3 wide receivers, Jefferson and Osborne, just really adding points to Kirk Cousins. He's had those couple touchdowns. It was Sunday against the Cardinals in the first week. He did get a lot of those points, I feel like, at the end once the Vikings were down a lot. But I feel like with the Minnesota's defense, you're going to have to pass the ball.
They're going to have to throw the ball.
And then with Cook being hurt, that's just even more to it. So I can see that. I think he might actually end up being a top 10 quarterback for this year because of how bad that defense is and how much they're going to have to try to keep in games and how he has to throw the ball. And so, I think that's a great pick. My pick is actually a different quarterback. I'm going with Daniel Jones with the Giants.
I almost put him on here because I think he will have who they're playing.
They're playing the Falcons. Right now, he's actually ranked the 7th ranked quarterback in fantasy. He scored at least 20 points each week. And he has that dynamic where he can run or pass because he showed that against the football team. And he even could have had another. I said football team. He could have even had another about 50 yards and a touchdown if it wasn't called back for that holding call. So it could have been even more points. And I just think what he showed last week, because I thought football team's defense is pretty good.
Pretty good, and they shut him down.
A lot and didn't use Barkley a whole lot. Threw the ball and just made plays on his own. Not coming in playing a bad defense, and I think it just makes it even better. So. I think Daniel Jones is a great start. I would only start maybe a handful of quarterbacks right now over Daniel Jones this week.
And that's what last week, like you said, we saw the different dynamic that he can do with his legs, which I think is a game changer for quarterbacks in fantasy football. If they can score you touchdowns with their legs, there's so much more of a threat to have on your team, especially starting your lineup, because that can take you from a 20-point score to 26, 27 points. And then, so, like last week, like you said, he looked great against a good Washington football team defense, I thought. And I think he'll continue to do that. The only thing that worries me, and I'm sure is the fumbling and the stupid plays that he makes with the ball in his hands. But, I mean, like we were talking a couple years ago, you were talking like Josh Allen like that, too. Like, Josh Allen would just be on his way down, just throw it behind his head and just say, I'm hoping somebody gets it. So I don't hate that play. Actually, I thought about putting him here because they are playing a good matchup against the bad Atlanta defense. And his legs just, to me, I think it changes everything about a quarterback. So I like that pick. And so I'll move on to my third one, which is a running back here. And I actually am going with a Dolphins player who I think is Myles Gaskin, solely because, like we talked about, Jacoby Brissett being in there. The Vegas pass defense hasn't looked terrible this week, but he's also with Edmonds. Gaskin is averaging 5 yards a carry as well. So I feel like they need to start giving him the ball more. And he's had 10 catches over the last 2 games, where he's averaging 5 yards a reception too. So I just feel like they're going to need to throw the ball a lot more this week against the Raiders if they can't run the ball. And I think he'll be a big point of that emphasis out of the backfield. But I think you also got to see them try to get him involved in the run game more. If you want to be a successful team in the NFL, you have to be able to do both, which run and throw the football. And I think in order for them to be good, he's going to have to get involved, and I think they're going to use him both ways this week, throwing the ball, catching the ball, and running the football. And I expect him to put up a solid week this week. I think he'll 15 points or more will be a very solid week for him.
Yep, I agree. I think that can be very easy for him because I don't like the Dolphins wide receivers. I do like Gaskin.
And that's
when you have a quarterback that when you're trying to figure it out, you need to go to your running back a lot just to make you plays and just have that easy pass.
Like a little James White reception. Just something quick, easy, build that confidence to eventually start throwing the ball down the field more so.
So I have a little bit of a sneaky one this week, and it's due if Marquise Brown doesn't play, which looks like he's not going to. I'm actually going with Sami Watkins. The Ravens are playing the Detroit Lions, and the Ravens have looked like, or Lamar has looked like he's passing the ball a little bit more.
A little bit better, yeah.
Has been really liking Marquise Brown, throwing to him a lot. And then now if he's going to be out, he needs a wide receiver to rely on. Hasn't been going to Mark Andrews a whole lot, which Mark Andrews could also be one in part of these sleepers as well. But Sami Watkins has already 15 targets through 2 weeks.
That week one he looked really good.
He has 8 catches. Yeah, the week one he had 24 yards per catch. So anytime he caught the ball, he was doing something with it. So I'm going this week against a Lions defense that has given up a lot of passing yards. And so if they're trying to contain Lamar and something where he can't run the ball a whole lot, he needs a pass first.
Yes.
And I think Sami Watkins might be that number one wide receiver for that week.
And that's why I don't disagree here. I think with the Ravens, I would have told you never touch any of the receivers to start the year.
Oh, I said that, yeah.
But the way Watkins and Brown have kind of looked over the last 2 weeks, I don't see why you wouldn't want. And especially Watkins, if Brown's not playing, he's a great person to put in your flex to hope that he's going to get the ball a lot and receive most of those targets because outside of Watkins, who do they have right now? It's not Brown. They have Andrews, but that's really it because they're not really throwing the ball to the running backs or anything. So I like Sami Watkins to be sneaky, especially if you're a flex play this week, to sneak in there and put up some high production points for you and kind of hopefully have that reproduction of that first week that he had. So I don't hate that at all. Expect him to have a pretty solid week against, especially if Brown. What is Brown out with? I didn't even.
Ankle. He did not practice today. It's not for sure yet, but it looks like he might be out.
He might be out. Okay, so that's something to keep your eye out for. And if you do have Watkins, definitely try to insert him in that flex play. If you have
he's actually only 36% rostered, so maybe if you have Marquise
Brown,
pick
him up on his waiver.
Yeah.
Yep. So my top 3 sleepers are Pittman, Myles Gaskin, Kirk Cousins, and then yours were
Pittman, Daniel Jones, and Sami Watkins.
So we each got running back, wide receiver,
quarterback.
So that is all we have for our Sunday must-starts, Sunday fades, and Sunday sleepers. Now let's get into some of the prop bets. Last week you went what in your prop bets?
I went 0-2.
And I think I went 1-1.
Yep, no, you went 1 and 2 because
1 and 2. I had
Waller.
I hit the Kyle Pitts over. Waller was 6.5. I think he had 5. And then what was the third one that I had? I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
We'll have to go back and double check. But we'll start letting you know our records for each prop bet. This week though, this Sunday, I have 4 actually for this week. How many do you have?
I only have 2 again.
2?
Yes.
So I'll go ahead and give 2, and then you give your 1, and then I'll give 1, and then you give 1. So my first one here is actually going to be the Detroit Lions against the Ravens to score over 9.5 first half points. And to me, I feel like we talked about this a little bit. The Detroit's offense has looked a lot better than what people expected it to. And I expect TJ Hawkinson to continue to get a lot of points and a lot of yardage. But I think we saw a little bit with the Ravens over the last 2 weeks. They're going to give up points on defense. And I feel like 2 touchdowns for the Falcons, or not the Falcons, the Lions, or a touchdown and a field goal is very something that can happen with Detroit. So I'm loving them over 9.5 first points in the first half. So that's my first one. My second one is one you've mentioned a lot that I talked about last year was Diggs over 6.5 receptions this week. And Buffalo is playing Washington, so expect them to kind of continue to look for Diggs and everything. And I feel like he can easily get over 6.5 receptions. Like each week, he can be that guy to get over 6.5 receptions. So my first two then will be Detroit over 9.5 first half points, and then Diggs over 6.5 receptions.
Gotcha.
What's your first one?
My first one, I talked about this earlier. I'm going Austin Eckler over 55 rushing yards. Chiefs defense, that running defense is terrible. They're almost last in all categories. So I believe he can get 55 easily.
Easily. So he didn't look bad last week against Cowboys defense either. So he didn't look like he had any issues with his hamstrings or anything.
Nope,
so I don't hate that one, especially what were the Chiefs were in the lower half of the league this year against the run. So Austin Eckler is it was over 55. 55, okay. My third one is going to be Marvin Jones over 4.5 receptions. And I think this solely because they're going to have to throw the ball a lot in order to stay in any type of the game with the Cardinals, because Cardinals will put points up for fun. So I think Marvin Jones will get over 4.5 receptions this week.
Yep, I see that. That's actually a really good one. I'm trying to go to my last. I believe. Where was it at? Here it is. My second bet is actually going to be Darren Waller over 6.5 receptions against the Dolphins. I think they're going to go back to they're going to throw the ball to Waller a lot more this week. I think it's going to be more of like what happened the first week. I think Derek Carr is injured a little bit, so I just think he's going to go more towards his person who he relies on. So yeah,
and that's what we had a great week by Jerry Jeudy last week. It's just how can you really trust that to happen again? So, Waller, I feel like week in, week out, you got to check those receptions, prop bets with it, because they might lower it because he didn't have a great week last week. But the first week we saw 19 targets. You just have to take the odds that they're going to get him the ball because he is their best player. Mm-hmm. So, I like that one. And then my last one is actually Sterling Shepard over 5.5 receptions this week against the Falcons.
Yeah,
and
I think that's a pretty, especially if Ingram and Galladay aren't playing, that's almost and
that's just because of how much targets he gets weekly and just how much better he's looked this year over the last two games than anybody. So I really like that to get over. So that's it for my props. Do you have any more? Or is that it for you?
That's it for me.
So for this week, my prop bets were Detroit over 9.5, Diggs over 6.5 receptions, Marvin Jones over 4.5 receptions, Sterling Shepard over 5.5 receptions, and let me just read it. It's Detroit over 9.5 first half points. And then what do you got then?
Then I have Eckler over 55 rushing yards, and then I have Waller over 6.5 catches.
Perfect. So that is going to round out our gambling topic and going to round out our Sunday starts, sits, and fades. Starts, fades, and sleepers. There we go. I said that one wrong. So this episode will be out Saturday. Make sure you check out our episode Sunday where we go over each game and then kind of give what we would bet if we wanted to, or just our opinions on the game, and then we give our favorites, underdogs, and lock of the week, which last week we both did pretty solid. So something to keep track of at home, and we'll let you know our records on the show. But we appreciate you listening. Go ahead and, if you haven't already, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. But we try to get 2 episodes out each week, and you can find us on all social media, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, TikTok now. Love tweeting out our picks before the games on TikTok, and then Facebook as well.
And Instagram.
So go check us out Twitter too. Everywhere, Action Network, to follow our bets each week, and you can just keep track of how much money me and Tim can be up as a group, and then you can see who's betting what. So make sure you go check all those out. And again, if you're watching on YouTube or you want to check out the video version of this, go ahead and head on over to YouTube, Fantasy Football Futures. Hit that subscribe button. But We appreciate all the support, and we'll keep them going. Thanks, guys.